A very brief history of hypnosis, presented by Stephanie Conkle. Hypnos was the Greek god of sleep personified. The gods were looking for a place to hide the greatest power that they held. They thought about placing it on the highest mountaintop, but they figured we humans would look there eventually. This discussion went on with different gods, suggesting different places, but none of them would be safe from us looking there. Eventually, it was Hypnos who suggested that the greatest gift be hidden inside each of us. Because we would never think to look inside ourselves for it. The History of Hypnosis 101. This is going to be a very, very brief history of hypnosis. Hypnosis has such a rich and deep and long history. There's no way that I can encapsulate the entirety of hypnosis and hypnotism in a short presentation. So I'm just going to touch on the points that I feel like is important for you to know. So just keep these in the back of your mind. So hypnosis has been used since prehistoric times. Shamans and faith healers using rituals, talisman, and relics in their work, all the way to the charismatic influencers of today use hypnosis even if they don't call it hypnosis. The ancient Egyptians used hypnosis in their temples of sleep. And the ancient Greeks used hypnosis in their shrines of healing. In fact, the word hypnosis comes from the Greek word meaning sleep, and that word comes from the Greek god Hypnos. Even though the word hypnosis literally means sleep in Greek, it actually is not sleep the way we think about it. It's not the same type of sleep as what is occurring during natural sleep when you fall asleep at night and wake up in the morning, or when you lie down to take a nap. But it does mimic sleep. So we still use the word sleep and wake up. Now, it was first called neurohypnotism, meaning nervous sleep or sleep of the nerves. But later, James Braid abbreviated and popularized it to the word hypnosis. Now, James Braid decided that sleep was not the best word for this phenomenon, and he tried to change it to monodeism, meaning concentration upon a single idea, but the word hypnosis stuck. While there are lots of people who are involved in the evolution of modern hypnotism, I'm not going to sit here and bore you with slide after slide after slide of everybody who was involved in modern hypnotism, but I'm just going to touch on the people that I think you ought to know. To understand modern hypnosis, we need to start with Franz Anton Mesmer. So, Mesmer was a physician from Austria who believed that there was some special magnetic force energy transference that cured his patients, meaning that there was something inside the body, something that was powerful, that he coined animal magnetism that could heal people. He shortened the word animal magnetism to just magnetism, and today it is now called mesmerism, after him, of course. So Mesmer thought that disease was result of obstacles in body fluid, and he thought that by creating a crisis trance state, meaning creating deliriums and convulsions, that harmony could be restored to the body. Eventually, he realized that he could transfer his animal magnetism or his magnetism to something else, like a stick or a tree or a barrel, and have people just come around the tree or the stick of the barrel and touch it and receive the healing, which many absolutely did. Now, Mesmer gets 2 slides because he has such a cool history, and I encourage you to read more on Mesmer. So, he got accused of fraud in Austria, so he moved to Paris. And while in Paris, he became very popular, especially among the elite crowd, the society, right? The high society. In 1784, King Louis XVI appointed a commission of scientists and physicians to investigate Mesmer, one of those scientists being the American statesman Benjamin Franklin. So the commission did lots of studies, and he was really unable to support his claims. And because of that, the Mesmerist movement declined. And the experiments carried out by the commission were known as the first placebo effects because these people could say that they were magnetizing a tree and they would get the same effects that Mesmer got on his patients. So, mesmerism had profound and curative effects, and Mesmer healed his patients, many of them, and this led to the development of the more legitimate applications of hypnotism. So, this is why Mesmer is important. So, although he wasn't doing exactly what we call hypnosis today, although maybe he was, he just didn't think of it that way. And there's 2 schools of thought on mesmerism and hypnotism, but we'll get into that another time. Right now, just know that he's the man, the first man. James Esdaile. So, James Esdaile used mesmerism. He was a Scottish surgeon who worked on patients in India. I mean, he had his own patients in Scotland, but then he traveled to India for a while. He worked on hundreds of patients in India where there was no chemical anesthesia available. And he learned mesmerism just by reading a book. And he put hundreds of patients into the comatose state just using mesmerism or hypnosis. Now, again, there's 2 schools of thought, whether you believe mesmerism to be hypnosis or whether you believe mesmerism to be something completely different. For simplicity reasons, and because this is a basic 101 class, we're just going to stick with calling it hypnosis for now. So he was able to use this hypnotic anesthesia to operate on his patients. And a lot of his patients in India had this terrible testicular tumors that he had to operate on. They were just very sensitive and excruciatingly painful. And he had to operate on those. And when he got his subjects or his patients into this mesmeric state, now called the Esdaile state, they would receive this general anesthesia. He would be able to operate on them and they would not feel a thing. In fact, the mortality rate in his major surgery patients dropped from a whopping 50% to 5%, and this has been well documented. So what you need to know is that plenary or comatose trance is coined after his name, the Esdaile state. So when you hear someone say the Esdaile state, they're referring to comatose trance. Now, if we're just accounting for hypnosis, modern hypnosis as we think of it today, and not mesmerism, then James Braid is the man. So James Braid is known as the father of modern hypnosis. He was a Scottish doctor who actually coined the term hypnosis, meaning sleep. And he was the first one who proposed hypnosis as mental and suggestive therapy alone, denying outside forces such as that crazy stuff called magnetism. He also gave the first definition of hypnosis, saying that hypnosis is a mental condition that often leads to a form of progressive relaxation. However, you need to know that he changed this definition later. Jean-Martin Charcot. Charcot was a French neurologist who used hypnosis for the treatment of hysteria and improvements in sensory acuity and memory. And he was also the first to describe what post-hypnotic suggestion was and demonstrate how to do it. His pupil, who doesn't get his own slide, is Pierre Janet. And Janet was the first person to describe dissociation as splitting of mental aspects. And he also emphasized the importance of rapport between the hypnotist and the subject or the hypnotee. Hippolyte Bernheim. Bernheim was a French physician, neurologist, and professor. He founded the Great Nancy School in France, where lots of incredible work was done. He influenced Freud, and also he was responsible for the evolution of psychoanalysis because of how much Freud was influenced by him. In fact, Freud thought of him as a mentor. He was the first person to demonstrate false memory and how it could be applied. Every day, in every way, I'm getting better and better. Now, if you've ever heard that little gem before, you can thank Émile Coué. So, Coué was a French psychologist and a pharmacist. He created the Coué method centered on autosuggestion. Autosuggestion is like self hypnosis, where you just repeat positive affirmations to yourself on a regular basis. So, for example, one thing that he suggested was to say every day in every way, I'm getting better and better, and do it twice a day at the minimum. He influenced modern self-help teachers like Norman Vincent Peale and W. Clement Stone. And he still influences people today. Dave Elman was an American radio host, a comedian, a hypnotist, and a hypnosis instructor. So he helped promote the medical use of hypnosis by training doctors and dentists across America. And he made the first instructional hypnosis audio recordings on vinyl records. He also invented the Dave Elman induction, or the DEI, which was one of the first rapid inductions. He needed to invent a rapid induction for his stage hypnosis shows. This is what he's famous for, the Dave Elman induction. He wrote the book Hypnotherapy, which is still used widely today by hypnosis students, and also his definition of hypnosis. Dave Elman's definition of hypnosis. Hypnosis is a state of mind in which the critical faculty of the human is bypassed and selective thinking established. Dave Elman Hypnotherapy, 1964, page 26. Milton H. Erickson. So I've done full videos and slideshows just on Milton Erickson alone. Milton Erickson, so many people have studied him. He has just tomes and tomes written about him and his work. He's considered a modern day genius. Milton Erickson was an American psychiatrist who contracted polio at the age of 17, which actually led him to observe human behavior. During this time, when he was confined to a wheelchair, he used self hypnosis to regain control over his muscles, to talk, to use his arms again, and eventually to walk with a cane. He's famous for his Ericksonian approaches, some of which that we'll go over later. Um, and he was also famous for the use of ambiguous language, indirect suggestion, the handshake induction, confusion methods, resistance, metaphors, double binds, utilization, destabilization, and other more unconventional treatments. He's such a fascinating character. There's so many good books written about him, and I encourage you to do more research on Milton Erickson. And whatever you study, I know that you'll find it helpful because his mind is a gold mine. Erickson's definition of hypnosis. The hypnotic trance may be defined for purposes of conceptualization as a state of increased awareness and responsiveness to ideas, in which there is a marked receptiveness to ideas and understandings and an increased willingness to respond either positively or negatively to those ideas. And this is from his collective papers, volume 4, page 174 and 225. Now, you may have noticed that Erickson's definition of hypnosis is different from Dave Elman's definition of hypnosis. What you're going to find is that there are many definitions of hypnosis. Lots of hypnotists sort of define hypnosis for themselves. In fact, if you research online the definition of hypnosis, you'll come up with just hundreds of different definitions. Even the American Psychological Association's definition of hypnosis differs from, say, the British Medical Association's definition of hypnosis. Many of my colleagues have their own definition. I have my own definition, and you too may come up with your own eventually. So that leads us to today. Now, the evolution of hypnosis keeps evolving, and it keeps evolving more and more rapidly. There are so many brilliant hypnotists who are alive today. And today we learn from our colleagues, and we also share our knowledge with each other to really strengthen the profession. We don't try to keep a lot of trade secrets with other hypnotists because what's good for hypnosis is good for hypnosis, as Jason Linett would say. Um, we define and redefine hypnosis as we forge new paths in the evolution of hypnotism. So, together, collectively, the fraternity of hypnotists, we now are the pioneers in the future of hypnosis. What will your contribution be?